All right, B-listers, you know the drill.
This is your official spoiler alert for the episode.
If you don't want any spoilers, stop the episode now.
And if you don't care about spoilers, hold on to your seats because this episode starts
Now.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Court.
And hello, fellow B critics. Welcome to another episode of the B Critics Podcast.
This movie is a bit wild. Determining what was real and what was not was almost impossible until like the very end.
Okay, but before we really get into it, let's tell the people where to find us.
Right. So you can follow the podcast on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at bcriticspodcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and follow our Instagram for all the best movie content.
Yes, subscribe and follow. So I think it is time to get into the episode. Our guest critic for this episode is Robbie. Hi, Robbie.
Hi, guys.
So Robbie is a college friend of ours. He's also a fellow podcaster, so you can go check out his podcast, Bros in the Berg. But yeah, so with that, Robbie, do you want to go ahead and introduce our movie?
Sure. So today we're talking about a movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is stranded at sea, but it's not the one that you're thinking of. Today we're going to be talking about Shutter Island.
Yay!
So, yes. Love the intro.
All right. So just real quick before we start talking about it, I'll run through a quick summary. Officers Teddy Daniels and Chuck Ole have been sent to Shutter Island, which houses Ashcliffe, an isolated facility for the criminally insane, to investigate the mysterious disappearance of one of the patients. But that's not all that's going on in this island. Teddy and Chuck quickly realize that something fishy is going on with the staff and doctors. They may be performing experiments on patients, and Teddy is determined to expose them. When he finally catches up with his accusations, the story is flipped on its head to expose what's really going on, which is not what you think, and who is really involved, which turns out to be everyone. What story can be trusted? Who is actually who they say they are? Nothing is as it seems.
Yeah, this is the most confusing movie ever. When you're like first watching it, it's like
it's confusing, and you're also like on edge the entire time. Like, you know something isn't right, but you don't know what it is. Like, something just doesn't sit right with you the whole time.
Yeah, and the music, you're like, what? Like, it's just like loud and like very suspenseful, and you're like, what is about to happen?
Yes. Okay, we're going to talk about all of those things, but before we do, let's talk about the episode ammo. So this movie is 2 hours and 18 minutes long.
It definitely felt 2 hours and 18 minutes long.
It wasn't that bad. I feel like movies today are like 2 hours and like 40 or 50 minutes. And so this was like much better than that, at least. But it's long. A mystery. Yeah, it did feel long. It felt long. I watched it in like 3 sittings, so it definitely felt long. But it's a mystery, thriller, drama in every sense of the word. It's rated R, which actually, yeah, that does make sense. It has a lot of bad language, disturbing, violent content, and definitely a lot of nudity, which like randomly shows up.
In the oddest places, yeah.
Yeah, the disturbing content is like what got me. I was like, oh my God, like that's pretty bad.
Yeah. This movie came out in 2010, which despite it being in the 2000s was actually like a pretty good year for movies.
Yeah, so the same year Inception came out, Black Swan, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which was like the 2-parter for the end of that series, The Social Network, which I feel like everyone has seen, and then also Twilight Eclipse, which if you haven't watched our episode on that, you can go do that now.
Yeah, The Social Network is probably the best movie of that year, and I'm surprised that Inception came out the same year. to be perfectly honest, I felt like this one like kind of felt like, so Leonardo DiCaprio's in that as like essentially the same character, and like I just feel like I felt a lot of parallels between those two movies. This one and Inception, so it's kind of weird that they came out the same year.
I guess mind bending thrillers were in 2010. So just
Yeah.
Yeah,
everything that was going on.
with Leonardo DiCaprio specifically.
Hmm.
Yeah. This movie was made by Paramount, and it was directed by Martin Scorsese. What a
Yeah.
classic guy. I'm kind of like surprised he's the one who directed this movie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think he was like the original person chosen to direct this, but he, I mean, all of his movies kind of have like something weird to them. So I feel like this kind of matches that. But he's also
Yeah.
been coined as one of the major figures of the new Hollywood era.
Well, he's
So,
like a very decorated director, that's for sure. I just feel like
yeah.
this is probably not his like best work. I found
Mm-mm.
a list of all of the like 20 something Martin Scorsese films, and like in order of how good they are basically, and this was like pretty low on the list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I saw somewhere that it's the only Martin Scorsese and Leo DiCaprio collab that didn't get any nominations at all, which
Yikes.
is wild.
Yeah, he also directed Goodfellas, which everybody knows of that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then he directed The Wolf of Wall Street, which is Leo, and he also like that's a pretty well-known and well-liked movie as well. And then
Yeah.
Aviator, I think, is Leo also.
I have no idea. I haven't seen that Aviator movie.
I haven't seen it either, but I think it's more recent. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the fact that Leonardo DiCaprio is in this movie, but it has like a pretty notable cast, just like in general. So it also has Mark Ruffalo, which we know is one of Liz's
That's my boy. I
faves.
love Mark
Yeah.
Ruffalo.
And then Ben Kingsley, and I also added
Sir Ken Kingsley.
Sir Ben Kingsley, and Emily Mortimer and Michelle Williams.
Emily
Eh,
Mortimer and Michelle Williams, who are their characters in this movie?
So Emily Mortimer is one of the Rachels. I think she's cast
The
as like
younger
Rachel number
one.
1. And
Okay.
then Michelle Williams is his wife.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she needed a mention.
Yeah, she was
And
great.
this movie, yeah. And then the acting in the movie is honestly pretty good. But the movie's known for being pretty confusing, and I feel like it's known for being like a Martin Scorsese, not a dud, but like not his best work, I guess.
I mean, you can call it a dud. It
Yeah, I just feel like this movie and Inception coming out in the same year is kind of mind-bending to me. Like they're
Mhm.
not even the
They're not on the same
same.
playing field at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
people might disagree, but I don't
I mean, this
know.
one is an adaptation of a book, right? So,
Is it?
yeah,
Hmm.
I
It
think
might be,
so. Yeah.
probably.
So, I think that may have something to do with it as well, because I feel like
Yeah.
book writers, like authors, are a little picky. I feel like when they get involved, sometimes movies go a little differently than maybe the director planned.
Yeah, I feel like the movie people want to ad lib off the book, and the book writer wants it to be exactly like the book, and then it ends up
Yeah.
being neither of those two things.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's how I am. I'm like kind of psychotic about the book to movie adaptations, and I love when they're like on point, and I get so angry sometimes when they're off. Um, but
Courtney's like, I
whatever.
am furious.
You have to accept that they're like different entities, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Mhm.
I want to start by talking about like the two main stars in the movie. So Leonardo DiCaprio and Mark Ruffalo. So we can start with Leo.
Mhm.
Um, this movie, in my opinion, I'm curious to see what y'all think, but I think this is like the most classic like Leo movie there ever could be. Like I feel like he was like made for this role.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
was. I mean, his acting was great through the whole thing. It felt like it was something he was comfortable with, and yeah, kind of kept up the farce pretty well, which I guess we'll get to at some point. But
He did too say, I know it feels very casual, like when you're watching it, you're like, oh my God, like this is easy for him, like whatever. But he did say that it was one of the most intense movies he's ever worked on, just because of like how like deep it all is. And like I think they
Mm-hmm.
made it feel very real on set. Like they had psychiatrists on set.
Mhm.
They were actually like filming in like what used to be insane asylums, and like I think it felt like very real while they were filming, which would be hard, I
apparently
think,
there
for anyone.
apparently there was a lot of visual effects in this, though, more than you would think. 'Cause it seemed like a movie that could be almost filmed entirely on set somewhere. But I was reading
Hmm.
online that actually
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was done with CGI and visual
Oh,
effects and stuff like that, which was somewhat surprising.
yeah. I feel like there were a couple parts that like looked like anytime
Mhm.
we got a flashback to like him being at Dachau, like it looked a little
Yeah,
questionable. But yeah.
I mean, there's not much to Dachau. It's like a there's like dirt there, basically. Like it kind of looks like that, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I I thought to your point, Liz, they did a good job like making it look like an insane asylum. Like it felt like have either of you been to like Alcatraz?
No.
mm
It looked kind of like that to me, which Alcatraz is like the same thing. It's like a prison on I don't think it's a mental hospital, but it's a prison on an island just
Hmm.
like this. And the whole point was that they put like the worst prisoners there so that they couldn't like go anywhere because they couldn't go through the water.
Hmm.
Um
that's where they put Al Capone when they got him for tax evasion. He went to
yeah,
Alcatraz.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So this felt very similar to that. Um
So
but
this is kind of an aside, but like kind of going along with what we're talking about. The three of us went to the University of Alabama, and
mhm.
there's like a pretty well-known former mental hospital there. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but we did at one point like go walk through it.
Snuck in.
Yeah.
Checked it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
I never went.
pretty creepy.
I didn't either.
So apparently there's two in Tuscaloosa. There's the one
There's
that's
the old one and the
on
new one.
campus and
There's the
then
one
the
that's like
other
on
one.
campus. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
the one on campus they're like turning into like actual
A
classrooms now.
theater.
They're doing a bunch of
Yeah.
construction and stuff on it. Yeah,
They haven't finished it
which
yet.
I
They
don't.
started that like
I'm sure it's
forever
not
ago when
done.
I was
There's
still
no
at
way.
school.
I don't think it's done. Yeah.
What it when I watch things like that, like this movie, like I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to that theater. Like that's just a little creepy. Um okay. But we were talking about Leo. So we said he was like a little bit like or Liz, you said he had trouble with this role. And I kind of get that
Mhm.
because I feel like this whole movie was like verging on the edge of being like way too over the top. Like there were a few moments when I burst out laughing and I was like, I don't think I was supposed to burst out laughing like in that moment. I think that was supposed to be serious. And so I feel like in general Leo did a pretty good job with that. Like keeping it just on the edge but within the bounds, but sometimes I feel like it was like way too much. I was like this is a little unbelievable.
I didn't have that reaction. I never laughed at any point in this movie.
Okay, that's
But there
good
definitely
probably.
were a couple a couple parts where I was kind of like, hmm, not sure about
Yeah, yeah.
that.
There were also a couple
Notably,
like
like,
things like I think they were supposed to be like, oh, like something is like isn't right, like things weren't
uh-huh,
cut right or whatever. But like
yeah,
I also think maybe some of it wasn't cut right because like the things that they did like make you feel like something was off
hmm,
didn't really feel like that. I was like, okay, maybe they just messed up there, but they can play it off as oh, we're just in this other something else is going on and we're trying to make you
hmm.
feel uneasy, but it didn't. I don't know, it
Yeah.
didn't feel right.
Like the scene where he's like interviewing one of the patients,
Mhm.
and they like grab her a water, and like you see him hand her the water, and then she goes to drink it, and there's nothing there, and then
Yep.
she puts the water
Yeah.
down, and you're like,
I
that was obvious. Like I
Yeah.
think it was supposed to be sly, but it
It was
wasn't.
very obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did feel very smart for catching that though, because I was like, "Oh, I saw that, sick," but like, it was very
Gotcha.
obvious. Yeah, yeah,
that part confused me so much I rewinded it and watched it again because I was like, wait,
same.
what?
Yeah, I did too.
I I still didn't understand that really. Like I just like she wasn't drinking things that people gave her or something.
I think it's supposed to be showing you
Or
though, like Leo isn't a
It's not
reliable
real.
narrator in this because like it's from his perspective, so like it's trying to it's not real. Like
Because it's
I don't
like
know.
leaving out key
oh,
details,
Yeah.
like her drinking the water.
okay.
Like, yeah,
Interesting. I think Mark Ruffalo too was like a pretty good and like opposite or like an opposite of Leo. So like I feel like Leo's character was like so over the top and Mark Ruffalo's character was so like
grounded.
monotone, like flat like the whole time and it makes
Mhm.
sense when you find out like who he really is in the end. Like why he was kind of acting like that. But I
Mhm.
also feel like that's kind of just how Mark Ruffalo acts.
I so if I'm being completely honest, and I love Mark Ruffalo, like love him, and I this is literally awful, but I haven't seen this movie all the way through before. I've only seen the end. So I
Mhm.
knew like the end. And but I didn't really understand like how they get to the end. And so like watching it, like when you first see the two of them together, like it's fine. But then like as you keep watching them, I just thought like Mark Ruffalo was doing a bad job acting. But
Mhm.
he's like supposed to be it's supposed to be bad because he's not an actor in the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a
and
good
so
point.
it took me a while to grasp. I was, like, upset. I was like, "There's no way he's so bad at this role. Like, there's no way, no way."
Mhm.
And come to find out, it was on
Yeah.
purpose.
They definitely had him do that on purpose. But
Yeah.
it was weird because I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, he is like not super believable as Chuck there.
And then he kept
He's
going
not
back and
supposed
forth
to
on
be.
like if he was like going to be like really like playing by the rules, or all of a sudden be like, no, you can do whatever you want, Leo. Like just go out there and like wander the island. And I was
Yeah.
like, that doesn't make
Mhm.
any sense. Like he seems like he's strict, whatever else. But I
Uh-huh.
think that was the point. Is like he had to keep him within some boundaries, but like also wanted him to go out and do his own thing at the same time. And I think part of
Yeah.
that was him being wishy washy on that part.
Yeah, they really needed him to believe,
Right.
like, who he thought he was.
Mhm. Okay. So,
Fun fact before we move off of Mark Ruffalo.
okay.
So on the internet, people are saying that Mark Ruffalo got the role of Chuck because he sent Martin Scorsese a fan letter saying how much he wanted to work with him and why.
Shoot your shot, I guess.
Yeah, it worked. I mean,
Um okay. Well, I
maybe I
mean, he
should
was
write a fan letter to Martin Scorsese.
I mean, you don't have things like 13 going on 30 like on your resume, so I don't know
Yeah,
exactly how that would work out.
You don't know till you
With the
try
Be
it, though.
Critics
Yeah, I mean,
podcast,
mhm.
true.
worth a shot. You should write to him, fangirl to
Yeah,
him. Make sure
I
you
will. I'll post it on the
um
internet.
include a headshot for sure.
Yeah.
Um one other character I just want to talk about a little bit.
Hmm.
Actually two. So I want to talk about Sir Ben Kingsley as Dr. John Cawley, the senior
Hmm.
psychiatrist, because I thought he was like really quite a character, like with his mustache and his like bow tie and stuff. Like he was definitely very larger than life. And like the fact now that I know that it came from a novel, that makes a lot more sense. Like his whole persona.
Well, he actually modified the persona from the book. So in the
Okay.
book, that character is like just an American doctor.
Okay.
And he like modified it. I think he made the character more than what it was initially. And I think it worked really well that he
They
did
made
Yeah,
him
I
that.
like a
think he did a good
stereotypical
job.
like villain. Like he just
Yeah.
looked evil from the get go.
And
Mm-hmm.
and he would say things and you'd be like, "You, my friend, are very suspicious."
Yeah.
Like, I don't necessarily think you're a bad guy, but you're kind of making it seem like maybe you are. Like,
Everything was very suspicious from the very beginning.
Mhm.
yeah. Like,
Yeah.
we're dropping you off on this island and then we are getting out of there. And he's like, why? Like, I wouldn't be getting off that ferry. I'd be like, no, I'm going to stay on the ferry. I'm going back with you.
I would have turned around the moment they took my weapons. I would have been like, "Bye, sorry,
Not doing it.
I'm a federal marshal. This is not the way I roll." Um, and then the other person I want to talk about is Michelle Williams, who played Dolores, Teddy's manic depressive wife. And she makes a lot of appearances like throughout in Teddy's like dream world, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, And I thought she did a fabulous job. I thought she was like really effectively creepy and like and I don't know, like she drew me in, and so it was kind of believable that she was like drawing Teddy in, or like he was obsessed with like thinking about her.
The last scene was like perfectly terrifying. Like she nailed that. The very last scene with the two of them,
Mhm.
like she like was very scary, but like also like was believable at the same time. I thought
Mhm.
she like
Mhm.
that last scene was just perfect.
I
The
wanted to
very
like her so bad. Like
Mhm.
I
Oh.
so badly wanted to like love that character. Like you see her like in his dreams and she's like, "Don't let me go." And I'm like, "Don't let her go, Teddy. That's the love of your life. Don't let her
Aw.
go." But then like you know she's bad because they're telling you the whole time that it's her. Like you know it's her when they're talking about this Rachel person, you know.
Also,
You
you
just
know there's
know.
something up with her because the very first dream scene where I can't remember if the first one is the one with like
The
all the
fire.
falling like shrapnel in the fire. Okay,
Yeah.
it must be.
Yeah.
Um, that one was so dramatic. Like
And
their
she's wet.
emotions in
She's
it,
wet
she's
the whole
wet.
time.
Like
Yeah.
they're breathing a lot. Like I was like, something's going on with this girl. Like
Also, like her whole
something's going
back
on
was
with
like
her.
falling apart, and then he like hugs her from behind. As like he would just be like going into like crumpled ash. Like it didn't make any sense. Like her whole back was starting to like crumple away, and he just like hugs her. I'm like, that doesn't. I don't like that. That he'd be
Does
covered
not
in soot or
compute.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something's not right about this.
Yeah.
I really
um,
wanted to like her. I wanted her to be a likable character, and like I get that she wasn't, but
yeah, I thought she was cute. She seemed like she
yeah.
could be likable.
Mhm.
That's why I feel like she did that role well, is
Mhm.
because like you had those emotions.
Yep.
Okay, so next I want to talk about the background music, or really the music the whole time. Um, and the one song that I do want to talk about is the like I think it must be like the main like theme of the movie. It's the On the Nature of Daylight by Max Richter. And this movie had like a lot of random music in it, actually.
Mhm.
But that one in particular has been used in like a number of movies. Um, and I liked that move or that music. It felt like kind of like Hans Zimmer-esque to me. Not quite, but like definitely felt like a movie score of this era.
There were also no original scores on the entire soundtrack. Everything
Mhm.
on the soundtrack for this
Mhm.
movie was pulled from other movies, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
on the boat, the very first song they play as they're pulling up at the island is from The Shining as well.
Yeah.
It's like kind of your first
Really?
tell, like, hey,
The opening
something's up. Yeah,
credits.
yep.
Yep. You're like, "Wait a minute.
Hmm.
This is
I
Not
know
this
this
place
from
is not
somewhere."
right. Oh
I
wow.
thought I liked the music. I thought it was really good music. There was just parts where it was like alarmingly loud. And I don't know if that was like part of the bit where it was
Mm.
like he was like imagining this in his mind and that's like how the music would have played or if they just made it loud. I'm not really sure, but it was like really loud, especially when they're like walking up to like go into the
Mhm.
like building for the first time and then he like touches the doorknob and there's nothing and you're like it just went from like movie theater loud to now like whisper and you're gonna throw everything off.
And it was a very like calm scene. It was very dramatic music with to go with
Yeah.
the calm scene. It was just off putting.
Yeah.
It didn't feel right.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. The music like right from the get-go was just like this is not going to be like you kind of knew that it was a creepy thrillery movie from the beginning. There was
Mhm.
no question about it. Um and along with that, like right at the beginning they had that like creepy lady um the who like looked at Teddy and like did the finger over her mouth like shh symbol.
That was too much. I literally saw that and I was like, "Nope, not watching this movie." Like if that's what this is gonna be, I'm like not a fan. I don't do scary
Right at
movies.
the beginning too.
I don't do horror. I don't do ghosts. And I like looked at that and I was like, I swear to God, one more thing and I'm turning this movie off. Like I just cannot. But that was like
Well,
the only part that was like that, really.
Yeah.
yeah, and I think so I want to talk about like the makeup and the costuming and like the way this movie is made and kind of like how it
Hmm.
made you feel. So that's kind of like the beginning part. But in general, and we'll talk about like specific moments, but I kind of felt like some of it was like overdone to the point where like it felt almost like unbelievable. I don't know, like kind of over the top, but
Like which parts?
like the whole thing, like what they were wearing and like the way people were dressed and acting, like I just feel like it was like a little bit like I told you, like I was kind of laughing. Like I feel like I shouldn't have been having that reaction to this like very serious thrillery movie.
I think some of that is like intentional because it's supposed to be like they're putting on a play like for him,
Mhm.
right?
Oh,
So
that's so
they dress him
true.
up like a detective.
Yeah.
They like put them in the prisoner garb or whatever. Like everyone's like dressed as they're supposed to be per his whatever he's
Fantasy.
concocted in his head. Yeah.
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 So I think that
Yeah, I
like
definitely
part of that was like meant to be like that.
yeah, that makes sense. I feel like this is one of those movies you need to like watch again to like really get it,
Mhm.
I think.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that later too when we talk about the end. Um, but
One
okay,
thing I
so
did, and this could just be me like not knowing like the time periods and all of that stuff, but I had this weird where I was kind of like, what year is it? And
Mhm.
like like kind of felt a little bit like it could have been like today or it could have been like a long, long time ago. And it's like set in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
mhm.
I think it would have been taking place in 54
Yeah.
based on like the
Yep.
timeline they gave.
Which is just
Yeah.
I don't know. I just had this weird feeling of like I don't even know like what time it is in this movie.
I think they were trying to get you to know that it was like somewhat close to the end of World War II because there were so many
Mhm.
flashbacks to that, and they were like all
Yeah.
World War II veterans. But I like you're right. Like before they started doing those flashbacks, I had no idea what time period it was.
Mhm.
I think it felt pretty accurate to what it would have looked like back then, honestly, because like prisons like this did still exist in the 50s. Um, and like the prison system in general has gone through like a lot of reform since then, like even into like the 80s and the 90s, I think. And there were like true like mental prisons. Like nowadays, like I don't think they treat people the same way.
I hope they
And so I
don't.
No.
know. And like I don't really want to talk about this like a ton, but I did not like that aspect of this movie. Like just the way that they would talk about like mental or like mentally disabled people like in this movie. I thought it was like really it felt very hateful. And I think that's more just like they were acting along with Teddy's character. But
And then
like that probably was pretty accurate to the 50s because I don't think people had like the language that they do now to speak about people with mental
Respect.
handicaps.
yeah,
Yeah, with
and that might have
respect,
been part of like
exactly.
Teddy's thing too. Is like he didn't have much love for these people because his wife probably had some mental well not probably had mental issues, and like obviously he was fighting through his own. It's like obviously he didn't have a
Mhm.
very good outlook on these people, and that was probably part of it as well.
Mhm.
Honestly, probably some of the psychiatric stuff they did was even ahead of the time that it would have been because they probably still were doing like lobotomies and stuff in the 50s, and they were talking about they were giving them drugs rather than doing that type of thing. It's like this hospital is probably somewhat advanced for the time, which I think they were trying to get at through the movie too.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It and the one guy who you're so suspicious of the whole time, the main doctor, Dr. Colley, I think that
Yeah.
Dr.
Mhm.
Colley, he's like the one that was actually like trying to treat people well.
Hmm.
And he was like
Yes.
trying to get that point across and that was just like going straight over everybody's head. Like just
The arc of
straight
it was
over.
good though. Like by the end, I like
Mhm.
totally felt like I understood his character. Like I liked it a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
And they threw you off by throwing in like the German doctor too. Like that was definitely an intentional thing to be like, okay, maybe they are evil. Like just with it being that
Yeah.
time period, it's
Mhm.
like, oh, here's an evil German guy. They're all working together doing this, evil thing. I think that was
Uh-huh.
intentional too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That whole storyline of like the um like Teddy, fighting in World War II and like going and saving every not saving, but like closing Dachau and like killing all the soldiers there, like mixed in with like the post World War II and the German guy. Like that felt very like um kind of realistic to like how all these stories always go. Like it's always some sort of like national like espionage thing, like the modern version being like the Russians are coming to get us or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So this is like the like little bit older version of that same story, I think.
And they even got into like the communist stuff because they had like the anti-American whatever those funding this hospital supposedly. They were trying to rat out the
Mhm.
communists in America and stuff like that. They even got into that part too. Um, they
That
got
should
they
have
got
been a
all of it.
giveaway that like that should have been a giveaway to the ending, honestly. I don't really know how like it wasn't to me because
Mhm.
that's so like the cliche version of this kind of story, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so we talked about it a little bit already, but the Dachau flashbacks, what did y'all think about those? Because they're pretty dark, honestly. Um, Especially the one where he lined up all the soldiers there and shot them. Um, that was very, very dark to me. That was probably like the one part of the movie where I was like, oh wow, like I kind of had to like look away a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Court, you know this, but I have like a soft spot in my heart for that
Mhm.
time period and everything that happened. So that was like, it was emotional for me because I was like, I like that. I can't imagine like witnessing that and like
Oh
what that
yeah.
would do to your mental health,
Yeah.
and seeing someone like on screen struggling with like having just witnessed this like atrocity against humanity, and then having to like grapple with his own like issues that he's having, and like knowing that he like played a part in it, like that was like made it feel real, like what he was going through, and like gave you like empathy
Yeah,
for the
for sure.
character a lot.
And then he had that, and then
Have
also his own personal issues after the
Hmm.
war too. Then I mean, beyond
Yep.
his what he had going on, like what was going on around him as well, which kind of made you understand where all of this was coming from.
Hmm. Yep.
yeah. Have either of you been to Dachau?
Have
Mm-mm.
not.
I've gone so like 100 years after this movie is set, and it's honestly like a very humbling place because they had gas chambers and crematoriums there. Um, and I did like a little bit of research into it. Don't want to talk about it like a ton, but I think that like at least like 40,000 prisoners died there. Um, and like they had over 200,000 people incarcerated there. And it's like, it's honestly like a tiny camp. Like it's so crazy. So I think they actually did those scenes justice. Um, and like effectively making it like very dark and like getting you in Teddy's head of like having that always like in the back of his mind. And like
Hmm.
I thought it was weird how they like kept flashing back to it and putting were they putting his kids in like the piles
Mm-hmm.
of the
the
prisoners?
daughter the
Yes.
daughter and his
Yeah.
wife. Yep. Or
Oh, that
not
was
his wife,
so
but the
creepy.
Rachel woman.
Yes.
Yeah,
That
it
kind of like
was
took the place
Rachel.
of his wife in his head for a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah, Rachel number 1 because there's 2 Rachels, but Rachel number 1 in his head was the one who like murdered her 3 children, I
Hmm.
think.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Um okay. The other thing too is the storm on the island that lasted like a day, right? And then they spent like a fourth of the movie just like randomly cleaning off like huge large branches from buildings. Like there was that one moment when the people that worked at the facility just like threw all the branch, like just threw it off the roof, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Okay.
I thought the effects that they used to like make the storm were just terrible. Like it's not what a storm looks like. We all know it. Like you
There
couldn't
were
have just
just
like
trees just like falling out of the ground left and
yeah,
right. I was like, I mean, what's a
shooting around,
hurricane? Yeah,
like flying all over.
Why was it
it was
so
like
destructive?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
And it's supposed to be off the coast of Boston. Does
That's what I was
Boston
saying.
have storms like that?
The Boston Harbor. I don't think it's a lot of hurricanes. No, I can't
No.
imagine.
And then they had the like moment where they were worried about the high profile prisoners that were in that like other building.
They're all
And they're
let
like,
out.
we were like,
They
if we
all got
shackle them,
free.
they're all gonna drown. And then they were like out and they were just like running around and all of like the prison workers were trying to like wrangle them
Catch
down.
them. So bad.
And they
What
talked
did
about how
that
like on lockdown it was, and they just let the two of them just wander in and like
Yeah.
walk around the halls and stuff. Like, oh yeah, this is fine. I guess they knew, but still, it was like that doesn't make any sense.
But also, like, okay, so you have this guy who's supposedly like pretty dangerous. He just like snaps on people, and you're gonna let him wander around in a facility where you know someone who he just like beat to literally almost death, and you're just gonna like let him walk through there and like, I don't know, he could have killed somebody. Like, he
Yeah,
could have
he
really
almost
injured
did.
someone.
He almost
Yeah, he
Like,
did
did
kill
almost
somebody. He
kill
tried to choke
someone.
out the one guy.
that's no bueno. No bueno.
That was one of those scenes where I was like laughing and I was like, I probably shouldn't be laughing at this. This is like a little crazy.
It was just kind of like, what is going on? Like, what is the point of this scene? Like, how does this add to the story? Which I don't think it really did, other than showing you that he's a violent patient, prisoner, whatever. I don't know, patient, I guess.
I think
Um,
what that whole scene did in that building where he like ran up and like choked at that guy and then he ran down and he like was talking to George Noyce, like
mhm,
that whole scene of like confused me, the viewer.
Mhm.
And I think that was the point of it, to like have enough going on that like you were left being like, wait, what did I just watch? Like I'm really
mhm,
confused about this story. Because I think without it, it would have been a little bit too like straightforward what was going on, and that kind of lets you like blur the lines between like being in Teddy's head and then also like being with the doctors and like Mark Ruffalo's like true character.
mhm,
This is also the first time that Chuck let him be alone was in this like high security prison where he just almost beat up a guy like that. Like he just let him run off and do whatever. It's like you're supposed to be keeping an eye on him to make sure he's not doing what he just did. And you just let him go see the guy again.
Yeah.
I think he like
Okay.
had to though. He like had to
Yep.
go see that guy. That
Confront
was
the
like
guy.
a
Yeah.
pivotal part
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
of him like coming back.
What did y'all
Yes.
think of that scene? Him talking to George Noyce like through the bars.
It was very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
It was super creepy. I like the way that George Noyce was portrayed.
I Yeah, I like watching that was like, I think like you said, like just served as confusion because I was like, okay, so this is George Noyce who we've been talking about, who's one of your friends who doesn't live here, and he's talking about this Andrew Latis person who you have been talking about in your dreams, and maybe he is
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Latis, maybe he's not. Like, I like very like the whole thing. I was like, okay, like who are these people? Like, who is everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Dolores being in the back of the cell, that was when I really knew that Teddy Daniels was like not all right. I was like, there's something going on in that man's head that is not just this facility.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that
Yeah.
the guy in the cell was even saying like you have to let her go is like he knew
He
something
Mm-hmm.
knew
was going
enough
on. Yeah.
about the
Mm-hmm.
situation. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's deep dive a little bit. We talked about the Dachau flashbacks. Let's talk about like all the Dolores flashbacks. So we talked about some of them, but they would always like randomly happen, and like they progressively got like more and more dramatic. Um, I think Michelle Williams did like a pretty good job in those flashbacks, but I just felt like they were like kind of confusing to the viewer.
And some were flashbacks and some were hallucinations where she would just like
Mm-hmm.
pop up in random places. And you just
Mm-hmm.
never, she's like the boogeyman. You never knew when she was going to come out of hiding. She would just like always be there. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it didn't like it really served a purpose. She was just there.
Mm-hmm. And as the viewer, you think like she's just his wife that died really
Mm-hmm.
tragically. And
At
so
first.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, okay, like I get it. Like this was a very tragic thing that happened. This was the love of your life. Like I understand, but you don't hold on to someone like that just because they died in a tragic way. So like it kind of lets you know that there's something more going on or something he didn't tell us.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Especially when we have all the flashbacks of the little girl. So at first you think that that's Rachel's daughter, who
Mhm.
is like at the beginning revealed as the woman who murdered her 3 children by drowning them. Um, but that girl was definitely confusing me because she kept coming back and I knew there was something to her. So do y'all feel like the dreams, the flashbacks, the hallucinations, like do you feel like they were a giveaway like from the beginning that there was something more going on here, or do you think like at first they just felt like true flashbacks?
Um, I don't really know what I thought they were. Um, I'm not sure that I even thought they were connected to the storyline in any way other than to show you that he's like unwell.
Okay.
And like,
Yeah,
and
I
yeah,
looking
that's
back
true.
on it, you can see how it give it away. Like looking back on them
yeah.
now, you understand what they were trying to show
Mhm.
you. But during the movie, I don't think it gave anything really large away until Rachel kind of stepped in and was like almost like portraying his wife. Then you
Yeah.
couldn't figure out like why do they have that connection. That's when
Mhm.
the first time I was like, okay, something does feel up with these.
The scene
Yeah.
where Teddy goes into
Her
Rachel number
cell.
one's cell and then like hugs her and like they have a
Yeah.
moment,
Hmm.
that was like really weird.
Yeah.
I think that was almost supposed to be him like coming out of it a little bit. Like he was
Mm-hmm.
coming out of his Teddy character back into Andrew and like
Mm.
for like a split second and having that like if if it was his wife standing in front of him like how he would treat her after like what had happened. And I think
Yeah,
he
it's
was
kind
like seeing her as Dolores and so it was like kind of coming back to him and he was like giving her
yeah.
comfort.
Yeah, it's kind of weird like talking about it with the perspective of the end that you know that's kind of what was happening because I when I was watching it the first time, I remember like not being as concerned about him. I was more concerned about Rachel. I was like
Mhm.
this
Hmm.
lady's weird, like why is she hugging him? Like he's being put through this. Like I was more concerned about her storyline because I was like, where did
Mhm.
she go? Like, how did
Right.
they find her? Like, she's very suspect. But I guess she was just like in on the role play.
I think so.
I think that woman may have actually been a Rachel. Not the Rachel he thought she was, but actually a woman named Rachel. And
Mm-hmm.
because after that scene, he kind of has like a freak out moment. And Dr. Colley is like, oh, like I didn't think it was going to go that far. Like I thought she was going to be okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, I think that woman was in no way, shape, or form all there
No,
at
I
all.
I think she was a nurse who was helping in the role play. So she was a
I
nurse
think
who
she
was
was a
posing to
patient.
be no, she was a nurse who was posing to be like Rachel, I think. And then the Rachel number 2 was just like a figment of his imagination. She was not real.
That is like a whole other thing. I thought
Yeah.
that woman was like a real patient that was
I
unwell because she was acting wild.
I believe that she was like this
Rachel.
crazy. I
yeah, I thought
thought
she
she
was
was
real.
like
Yeah.
the psychiatrist for a second. But then I was like, but why is she just like traveling around this island? Like, why doesn't she want to get off? That's really
Because they
weird.
can't get off. No one gets off.
Nobody
The
out.
rats.
No
Can
one
we talk
gets
about the
I
rats for a
hated that
second?
scene.
And he like was like stepping around the
Does
rats.
he
I was
have an
like,
aversion to rats? Like, what is the deal with the rats?
yes, I think everybody has an aversion to rats. If you saw that happen of them like coming out of that hole, what in your right mind would make you step through the rats? The hundreds of they were huge. Did you see how big they were?
They
And
were
then
rat
go into the
sized.
hole that they came out of. You cannot tell me if you saw rats like that, you would not like turn and bolt the other direction
Where's he
into
gonna
the sea.
go?
You would have gone into the sea. It'd be better than those
The water's
rats.
freezing.
Was it supposed to
I would
be
be like,
like
I'm
the
swimming to
he
the
was gonna
lighthouse.
he was gonna find the rat of like the facility up there? Was this supposed to be like a metaphor of like, oh, he found the person's gonna rat out what they're doing, and like
Oh.
that's why there were so many rats, even though she wasn't real, but like maybe that's what, I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't like that scene though. Too many
Interesting
rats.
thought.
That is very insightful. Could be. What really struck me about that scene, like the whole time I was watching it, is the like split second moment that you saw Mark Ruffalo's character just like laying at the bottom of the cliff. Like he had fallen down the cliff into the
Mhm.
water. And I was like, whoa. And then he like appeared later and I was like, I'm so confused about how he didn't fall and die. And then it kind of all started to make sense. So I guess um at what point did y'all like start to realize kind of what was going on? That like he was really a patient who was having like some sort of hallucination.
Not for walks. I really did like. I like when they gave him pills at the beginning. I'm like, oh, those aren't going to be aspirin. Like those are going to be
Mm-hmm.
something to
Something.
like mess him up. And
Well,
so
and it
like for
was
a
in
while
like
there, I
a
was like,
little
okay,
cup. And you're like,
hmm
oh,
yeah.
pre-portioned. Nice.
So I was like, okay, maybe they are pulling like this fast one on him and this like this evil scheme. I didn't really realize it until they were in the lighthouse. Probably I was like, okay, there's nothing in the lighthouse. Like something's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same. I think it was for me it was the lighthouse. I thought
Yeah,
for sure that he was gonna like they were drugging him and they were trying to like capture him and make him a
yep,
patient somehow.
I did too.
The scene, and we already talked about the scene, but where he's talking to George Noyce like through the bars is when it
Mm-hmm.
started to make sense for me.
Oh
And I
wow.
just wrote down like George is the only one telling him the truth, question mark, because that
Liz,
was
you're
the only
very
story. That was the only
smart.
story that
You were
was
ahead of
different from
us.
the
Yeah,
story everyone else was telling him. And
it was the only one that
so,
wasn't scripted. Yeah, because
yep.
everyone else was
Yeah.
like very scripted and on point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that's like kind of
That
where
makes
I
so
started
much
to figure it
sense.
out.
Because that's how when
Because
he
I was
got away
like,
from
this
Chuck.
is different. Yep.
Yeah. Oh.
And
Oh, I feel like I need to watch this movie again.
there was like a weird interaction he had with the warden after his little like fiasco running around on the island for like 48 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, I was like, okay, like
About the
they know
violence.
each other. This warden knows this person that's
Yeah,
only been here for however long, and this is your first interaction and you know each other that well. Like,
You're talking about
yeah,
the
I did
scene
not.
where they're driving in the car and they're like talking about how
the
they're
like
both
golf
violent
cart thing.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like,
And
"What
he's
would
like,
you
what
do
if
if
I
I just
just,
bit your eye off right now?"
yeah.
Like,
And he's like, go ahead. Okay.
That scene
Okay.
was just like weird. I feel like that was just Martin Scorsese being like, we just need to like inject a really strange scene just to throw people
yeah.
off.
And the
Yeah.
warden did nothing else in the entire movie. Like he was just
No.
there. Otherwise, that was like the
Yeah.
Well,
only
That
scene
was
he was
it.
actually in.
You know what that scene effectively did though? I thought it was so weird that like all that crazy stuff had happened where like Leonardo DiCaprio was just like running around the island and then he just like appeared out of the woods and got picked up in a car by the warden. I was like, okay. No questions asked. Like
I guess that
it's
kind
kind
of
of
proved like
weird.
they knew exactly where he was the whole time because like they
Somebody
definitely
was
sent a
watching
Mhm.
car to
him.
go get him. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I guess like at the very end, the end is confusing to me. And I thought the way that they did it was cool. So we'll kind of talk about how they did it and then we'll talk about like the two interpretations of it. So how they did it, like when he goes to the lighthouse and he's like the scene where he's running up the lighthouse and then he like stops on a landing and goes out the door and there's like nothing in there. And then he does that like 3 times until he gets to the top. And then they explain everything to him. Um, and probably the coolest part is like how they show how intelligent Andrew Latis really is, and how his mind is like kind of crazy. Like it was definitely giving me like a beautiful mind feelings
Mhm.
at that moment. Like especially with the anagrams of the names. Like I did not pick up on
Yeah.
that at all.
no,
I mean, how could you? The
No,
other
Latis is not exactly
anagram,
a common name.
no. The other anagram that's like very intriguing to me is actually the title. So Shutter Island is an anagram for truths/denials.
What? That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, this is definitely a book. You can tell this is definitely a novel. It's way too
Yeah.
creative to be a movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I was
guess.
I was like very about the anagrams. I was like somebody like hold me down. Like this is wild.
Yeah.
I was like, this is so cool. And like this whole world that he had constructed, like it's just phenomenal that like people can do that. Cause I mean, this is something that actually happens. And
Yeah.
so like the fact that it was so well put together, like there weren't any holes in his story.
Well, they
Like
even hinted at
everybody
it
had a place.
with Rachel because they're like, oh, she still thinks that she's at her house, and everyone's just like delivery men or postmen or milkmen. Like they even
Yeah.
hinted at people being able to like construct this reality that
Hmm.
no one can even poke holes in. Even if you sit there and tell them this isn't real, like they still are in their own reality.
Yeah.
They kind of like set that up at the beginning.
Hmm. It's like the Truman Show, but the opposite.
Mm-hmm. The less fun Truman Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess like the truth of what happened to him is that his wife, Dolores, was what they say manic depressive, and he kind of knew about it but didn't react properly, and so she ended up burning their house down and then drowning their 3 children, and he found them, and then I
She
guess
didn't burn their
he
house down.
Mm-hmm. She burned. That's what they at first. She just burned their like apartment or whatever down, and then they moved to that
mhm,
lake house, and then that's where she drowned the kids.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
mhm.
I
So
didn't pick up on that part.
he like knew that
There
she was
was fire.
crazy.
You didn't just like
Yes,
Yeah.
make
there
up the
was.
fire.
No,
Okay.
there was fire. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, kind of, I think what they said is that the reason he created this whole world is because he felt responsible for it. Like, he felt
Mhm.
like, oh, I knew that she was not well. And
I
instead of
didn't get her
doing something
help.
about it and getting her help, I left her at this lake house with the kids for a week.
Yeah.
And then she just drowned them. And, like, he felt like it was his fault.
Mhm.
And then that he was just like drinking, I guess, to get away from it. Like he was just like, I'll just forget about. Like also like his past problems. Like, oh, I'm just gonna drink and then act like it's not happening. And I think he kind of blamed
Mhm.
himself that way too.
That feels very, very realistic to the 50s. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
people dealt with problems, just
Yep.
ignore them and
I think people
drink them
still
away.
deal with problems that way.
Yeah, but at least like they're more out in the open. People talk about them more.
Some people talk about it more.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. We can talk about them here if you want to. Okay. There's so then the very, very end. So, Dr. Colley base and um Chuck or Chuck
Dr. Sheen.
yeah, he's Dr. Sheen at this point. Like, he's revealed to be his like main psychiatrist. They kind of explain to Teddy like, "Hey, like you need to accept this reality so that we can say that you're accepting it, and we can tell them not to lobotomize you."
Well, it
Um
was also like a big experiment that they were doing with him to
Yeah.
prove that they could like pull someone out of it by playing along with them and showing them like showing them exactly what they think is happening is not by
Right.
letting them believe it and then like getting to the point where it's like, all right, where is it? Show me. You've run around, you've done all of this investigating and it's not here. Show us where it is. Like you have
yeah.
to accept it. Like at this point in time you have to. And so I think that they were like going to it being like a very progressive facility. Like they were trying to not have to do whatever, medicate or
Yeah.
restrain or whatever these people, like we can bring them
Mhm.
back.
Well,
And
so then
they need him to go, like they needed him to come back to prove
Yeah.
that
yeah.
they could do it.
So they get to him. They go through his role play, and then he realizes who he is and what really happened. And then at the very end, he's on the steps of the facility with Dr. Sheehan, and he makes the comment like kind of about wanting to start it all over again. He like mentions like, "Come on, Chuck, we've got to like figure out what's going on this island." And so I think there's two interpretations to this ending. And I had very specifically, I remember in this moment, like having one of them. And so I'm curious to know like which one y'all thought. So the first interpretation is that Andrew Latest relapsed again. So he's starting over. He thinks like, okay, like this is Chuck, we've got to get off this island. Like his brain is like
He's Teddy
recreating.
again.
Yeah.
Yes, it's recreating him. Um, the other interpretation is that he knows full well what's going on. He's accepted reality, but he wants to die. So he asks at the very end, like, is it worse to live as a monster or die as a good man? And so, like, one interpretation, and this is what I thought, is like, oh, like he doesn't want to live
He's smart
anymore. He
enough
wants
to
to be
know.
lobotomized. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe he hadn't relapsed at that point. Maybe he knew like I will, and then we have to go through this again, and I might as well
Eventually,
just
yeah.
say that I relapsed now and get it over with. Like
Instead
maybe
of
he
like
just knew.
hurting more people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they did actually bring in a psychiatrist to like psychoanalyze this scene and to
Ooh,
like
that's cool.
explain what's happening in the scene and to like tell based like in the psychologist's like professional opinion what had happened. And what had happened is that he did understand. And
Yeah.
Dr. Sheehan knew he understood, but also understood that he was like letting himself go. It's
Yeah.
like I'm ready to not have to live this way anymore. And so like this is what I have to do. And that's
Hmm.
the end.
I was thinking
I
at the end of the movie that I wish they'd left it open, not in that way, but in the way of
Mhm.
like not knowing if he was being detained wrongfully and they made up this story to like keep him there, or if he really was crazy. Like, I wish they'd left that part of it open. Like, is
Yeah.
he really this
mhm.
Leoness person, or did they make that up? And like you had to like determine
Yeah.
yourself if that was true or not.
Mm.
I thought that would have been
Yeah.
cool, but
That would be
I was glad they left
interesting.
it a little open ended still.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I really liked this scene and I like the fact that it was kind of open-ended. The scene like almost made me add a half a star to the rating. I like debated it for a second. But I don't think it was like quite as open-ended as it could have been, to your point, Robbie. Like, for
Mhm.
example, Leo's other movie of this year, Inception, I think that has like a much more like effective open-endedness to the end that I liked. And like I think this was like kind of just really like your interpretation, but both ways are kind of like the same in the end. Like, I don't
It
know.
doesn't really matter cuz
Yeah.
he's not going to
Yeah.
be the same person anyways.
It's not
Yeah.
really an open ending. It's just like how we got to the ending, like what route we took. Did he actually relapse, or did he want to be lobotomized? Because we know how it was going to end is that he's going to get a lobotomy, but you don't
Mhm.
know
Mhm.
the decisions that got him to that point. I guess is the openness of it.
Ugh,
Yep.
the thought of a lobotomy is like so barbaric to me. Like, ugh.
You don't feel it. It's painless.
Oh, okay.
I mean it is.
Uh, yeah, I know, but just like leaving people in that state, I don't know.
Do you know that they used
Um,
to do that to women who like were like had opinions and stuff? They just like lobotomize them and be like, "Oh, look, she's fixed."
well, they were witches; they had to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Now we just run
okay.
amok all over the place.
Casting spells, wreaking havoc. Okay. So that's
Talking about
everything I
movies we
wanted
don't
to
know
talk
anything
about.
about.
Oh shit, we better watch out. Um, is there anything else that y'all wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
I think
I don't
we
think
did
so.
a pretty thorough
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we got it
Yeah.
all.
Okay, cool. So let's go to the ratings.
Okay, cool.
Robbie, as a reminder, we rate our movies through Letterboxd, so 0 to 5 stars with half-star increments. So if you would like to rate it first, Robbie.
I'm gonna give it a 3.
Oh.
Okay.
I didn't think it was horrible. Like I didn't think it was an awful movie. We talked about many of the issues with the movie, and they were there. But I think
Uh-huh.
it's an above average movie, and I was like interested to see how it was going to end. I wasn't like, oh,
Mhm.
like whatever, and like I didn't know how it was going to end. So I'd give it a 3. It was above average for me.
Nice,
Okay.
nice.
That's pretty respectable.
Mhm.
Liz.
I gave it 2.5 stars. So like
Okay. Halfway
very
there.
Middle of the road, yeah. Like I don't think it's one that I need to necessarily watch again. Like if I felt so impelled to like understand more about it, like maybe I'd watch it again. And like I don't know, like if this is your kind of movie, go watch it. Like you'll probably like it better than I did. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 2.5 stars. It was okay. It was okay.
Yeah, I also gave it 2.5 stars. I like enjoyed the movie and I enjoyed the acting, but kind of like I said, like my brain was just like not really getting it. Like I was like, there were moments when I literally burst out laughing and I was like, that was not supposed to be
Supposed to
funny.
be
Like
funny.
I don't really know what's going on. Like I
Was
think I just really
unlocking
didn't
some
get
personal
it.
things for Courtney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And so I think it was just like kind of like what I was saying at the beginning. Like it was like on the cusp of like being so dramatic that it was like way too over the top. And like that would like get those points in my brain where I was like, this is just like a little cheesy.
Mhm.
But in general, I liked it and I liked the story and I thought it was I enjoyed the ending. Like to your point, Robbie. Like I by the time I got halfway through, I was like invested enough to like keep going to like figure out what was
Right.
happening because they kept you kind of confused the whole time. So that was good.
Mhm. So we all gave it like very like average ratings.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the world would not agree with those ratings. So on Letterboxd, it has a 4.1 average.
It's pretty good
Um,
for
the
Letterbox.
tomato meter has the lowest score, which is a 69.
Okay.
The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a 77.
Wow, it's pretty good.
On
Yeah.
IMDb, it got an 8.2, so right up there with Letterboxd. And 89% of Google users liked the movie. So
Wow.
we're like
This is
the
not our
minority.
genre, apparently. Not
We
not
are
our type of thing.
harsh critics over
Yep.
here at the B Critics podcast.
Yeah. I wouldn't say harsh. I feel like this was maybe not like type of movie the three of us watch on the reg.
I don't think that's true. I think I generally like movies like this. Like I like psycho thrillers. I just think this
Okay.
one was like a little bit extra. Maybe. I don't know.
Tried
Something
a
about it
little
was
too
off.
hard to be like a make you
Cool.
think
Yes.
type of movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was trying too hard. That's the right way to put it,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, that's all we've got for this episode. So, Robbie, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Like Liz mentioned at the beginning, make sure that you go check out Robbie's podcast, Bros in the Berg.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're on all streaming platforms. You can follow us on all social media at Bros in the Berg. So go check it out.
It's like a sports, like
Yeah. If you
comedy
like sports,
sports.
yeah.
Yeah, very different than
Sports,
this, not
some
movies.
pop culture. Yeah, we talk about the most movies we talk about is like Marvel movies. So if you're interested in Marvel and like movies, you can come over and
Yeah.
check us out. But
You can
that's
get your
about
Marvel
it.
hook up there because
There you
you
go.
won't get
Yep.
it here.
No, you will not.
There you
Just Spider-Man only.
Yep.
Maybe
Maybe
Batman.
one day we'll do Deadpool. It's funny.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All
Thanks,
right. Thanks,
Robbie.
Thanks,
Robbie.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. And also goodbye to the B Critics fam. Thanks for tuning in to our episode. Be sure to leave us a rating or a review, drop us a comment on YouTube, and leave us an answer to our poll and Q&A section on Spotify.
And you can find more information about the podcast and our whole podography on our website, bcritics.com, or find the links to all the things on our Linktree in the episode show notes.
Next week, we're going to be talking about A Simple Favor, which is equally as dark, but lighter somehow. I don't know. You'll just have to watch and listen along.
Be sure to subscribe and follow on all the things so you don't miss it. You can find us on your preferred platforms. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
All right. Bye, guys. See y'all next Monday.
Bye, guys.